Hello, the Fabian Society. This society, well, I've heard of it. I'd heard of it over the years and just presumed it was another think tank who would put forward ideas and wouldn't really have that much clout or influence. But particularly right now, there seems to be a flurry of chatter about the Fabian Society. Some people suggesting that they are there to subvert the West, to change the way our country functions. And by our country, I mean the UK. Although there are Fabians apparently, or at least connections to Fabians in other countries as well. So what is this Fabian Society? Is that true, or are they simply toothless academics? Spoiler alert, just in case you're short of time, I did a bit of investigation and initially thought maybe there's something in this, and then thought actually no, get a grip, there's nothing. And then thought perhaps we do have to pay attention to these people after all. I will explain my reasoning in this video. I'm also interested to hear what you think. So to begin then, let's look at Wikipedia. Not always accurate, but the Fabian Society is a British socialist organisation whose purpose is to advance the principles of social democracy and democratic socialism via gradualist and reformist effort in democracies. Now, socialist ideals, social democracy, okay. Reform, okay. And democracies, okay. But one of the words to pay attention to there is gradualist, because the Fabian approach does seem to be, well, slow. It takes time. So they're not about, as the snippet here goes on to tell us, radicalism. Although they were historically related to radicalism, but not right now. Or at least not radical in the sense that something would happen overnight. They may be radical if you measure them over decades or even a century or so. So then, still Wikipedia, as one of the founding organisations of the Labour Representation Committee in 1900 and as an important influence upon the Labour Party which grew from it, the Fabian Society has strongly influenced British politics. So this is pause for thought. So essentially, whilst the Fabian Society are not the Labour Party, they were there at the start. They had a huge impact on the formation of the Labour Party, and by their own admission, the Fabians, they still do. In fact, as we shall see, many people, prominent people in the Labour Party are members of the Fabian Society. But should that be an issue? Should it be a problem? Well, let's look to this article, The Secret Society Dedicated to a New World Order, the Fabians. Now, every article I quote from here, and indeed the videos that I will show you in a little while, the links to them will be in the description to this video. I'm not going to go through every part of this article, but I'll just pick out part of it because I want to illustrate why and how some people suggest that the Fabian Society may be more than a toothless think tank. A case in point is the Fabian objective to eliminate private ownership of land, one set down in the Fabian Society programme of 1887, known as the Basis, one that chimes with the World Economic Forum's vision of a world in which people own nothing yet improbably remain happy. You may recall that mantra from 2 or 3 or so years ago. In current day terms, there are several attacks on private land ownership. One comes from the introduction of inheritance tax on farms, a policy of the Fabian Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves. Yes, apparently she's a Fabian, allegedly. The Chancellor, okay, which risks leading to the forced sale of privately owned farmland. You're probably aware of that. These risks could be avoided were savings made from the overseas aid budget controlled by Fabian Foreign Secretary, now Deputy PM, David Lammy. Apparently David Lammy is a Fabian, allegedly. But the Fabians within the Labour Party remain resolute in taking the money from British landowners rather than overseas populations. And what we can see there is this connection that the author has made between something kind of germinated in 1887 and linked it to present day. And that may look on, first glance as being a little bit fantastical. And it might be. And yet remember that the Fabians are about time. It's a gradual process. They play the waiting game. It's all softly, softly. One of the original logos, if I could call it that, I guess that would be the present day name for it, was a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I think one these days is the tortoise, or if you're from a different part of the world, turtle. Slow, steady change. That's what they're about. So maybe it's not ridiculous to make that link between something that happened over 100 years ago and some present day goings on. Then we have this article from The Spectator, and I put this in way of balance, because you can make links between many things, but correlation doesn't mean causation, if I put it that way around. And maybe people are just overreacting, just being unsettled about the fact that there does seem to be some kind of society that is potentially manipulating and influencing things behind the scenes. What I would say about the Fabian Society is that it's not, as some people have claimed, it's not a secret society. Really, is it? It's not hidden. It's up front. It's in your face. But it could be that some of the things that are going on are not open and public. Anyway, let's go here. This article, The Spectator, by Stephen Pollard, The Truth About the Fabian Society. It's a strange feeling finding out that you have been part of a revolutionary group that secretly controls Britain and didn't realise it. For 4 years in the 1990s, I was the research director of the Fabian Society. It was a wonderful job at a time when Labour under Tony Blair, I believe a Fabian, allegedly, was open to new ideas and policies. As a Labour-affiliated, mildly left-of-centre organisation, the Fabians were very well placed. Now, what's wrong with that particularly? Mildly left-of-centre. People being open to new ideas. That sounds okay. Anyway, earnest thinkers, networkers, youngsters finding their feet in politics all had a space in which they could come together and think about and discuss politics and ideas in an environment where questioning the received wisdom was the point, rather than a political crime. And I like that. That sounds good. Questioning the received wisdom. It was okay. That was the point. Great. Good. What's not to like? So you can see why Stephen, as the research director in the 1990s of the Fabian Society, would defend this society, because that does sound absolutely not just fine, but like a good idea. Anyway, the article goes on. You don't, however, get training in destroying the West or infiltrating public bodies. For the £5.90 a month that membership costs, that's a bit much to expect, and that's fair enough, isn't it? Yeah, okay, so pay your £5.90 and you get your secret documentation, which of course is why the author is writing it this way, to poke fun at this idea. The Fabian Society is doing something which is odd and let's say anti-constitutional, to use that particular term. Does it matter that so many people online seem to think that membership of a harmless, worthy and truth to tell, slightly dull organisation is in fact evidence of a secret society that is bent on subverting the West? No more than any more of the wacky conspiracy theories that are the meat and drink of the online world. But it is evidence of at least one thing. The drip, 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 delegitimisation of our institutional norms through willingness of all sides of the divide to accept anything, no matter how bonkers, if it provides a political dopamine hit. And you think, yeah, okay, so that's good. I think it is important to not get into echo chambers with pretty much anything, to not dive down a rabbit hole and not be able to find the way out. So hence, from that link between the 1800s to present day to this up-to-date article by someone who worked for the Fabian Society at a high level. But yet, if you look at the list of Labour Party members who are Fabian members, it's quite impressive. It's quite staggering in some ways. So part of me says, well, hold on a second, what does that mean? Then I think, well, wait a minute. The Fabian Society was Labour. Why they sort of diversified, so to speak, I don't know. Why did they just not stay in Labour? But they didn't. Maybe they prefer to be behind the scenes, influencing, and they do seem to influence. And yet there's something about these people in Labour who are connected in that way. Is it simply a loose association? Is it simply the £5.90? Is it simply a sort of little badge to say, oh yeah, I joined as well. I joined the yoga class. I don't go along that much and I don't really like it, but I'm a member just like you. And then I think, hold on, anything that smacks of a bit of a nod and a wink and a club, I'm never that comfortable with. But given the benefit of the doubt to the author, in terms of his rendition of what the Fabian Society was like, it does appear as if this is a bit of a storm in a teacup. However, I want to play you 2 or 3 video clips because there is a different opinion out there. And in some ways, this encapsulates quite a lot of that opinion. Now, I should say, in terms of the Spectator article, I believe that author is absolutely genuine. I believe that was their experience. I believe that what their description of the Fabian Society was accurate. But consider then any society, any team, any group, any organisation. There are echelons, there are cliques, there are groups within groups. Would every conversation be held in the open to the £5.90 paying members? I doubt it. Could it be that people who were connected through that ideology talked in private, had discussions, planned to do things and did things? Could that be the case? I think highly likely. Anyway, let me play you this video clip. Joseph Robertson, a political strategist.
I mean, to your average listener, they probably never even heard of the Fabian Society. And if you ask people even on the left of politics, they might think it's some kind of low-level think tank that has little groups around the country that meet up to discuss policy, sometimes doing slightly bigger conferences. But the reality is this is a behemoth, not only in terms of the individuals it's produced, but also the length of time it's been around. I mean, it's been around for 140 years or so. And it was essentially the group that founded the Labour Party. It was what we call a gradualist movement, which means they like Marxism, but they don't believe in revolution. So that basically means they want to do things slowly. And boy, have they succeeded. I mean, from the Attorney General, Lord Hermer, all the way through to the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, all the way through to the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. They have all of their best and brightest arrayed in these positions. And as you say, they have a very, very clear and stated mission statement. It's not something they keep hidden. They might be wolves in sheep's clothing, but I don't see much of the sheep's clothing. It's very much a mission to destroy the nation state and rebuild it piece by piece. And I think Tony Blair was one of their key assets in doing this. He was the guy who, of course, brought in things like the Supreme Court, the rule of law as an oath, which the Lord Chancellor takes, and I'm sure Stephen will go on to the meaning of that and why it's so important. But he really created a separation of powers. He began what I call the backdoor to cultural regicide, because, of course, Marxists love nothing more than beheading a king. And I think that's the best overview I can give to you right now.
I think that was a very consummate overview.
So, I think we're getting the opinion that these people may be quite Marxist in ideology. That's what I picked up from that. And that is a different opinion, isn't it, from the Spectator article. We're going to hear now from the barrister, Steve Barrett.
That's just international law. Talk to me about how the Fabians have essentially built this edifice, which has essentially stripped the country of democracy and stripped those who really do wield power of any accountability.
Well, yes, and I wouldn't say it was all the law. It's been, and you're right to highlight international law, and something that your listeners and viewers might know of as international public law and human rights barristers and human rights lawyers. This is the clique that we are dealing with. The types of law that run the economy have largely been left untouched. But just so your listeners and viewers know, I believe that the Court of Appeal judge who heard the Bell Hotel Epping case should not have heard the case. I think we have a legal test called apparent bias, and I think it was more than satisfied on the six. I identify 6 reasons why he was too close to the government to hear the case. But he is also a Fabian. And I put in a complaint, which is all I have no more powers than a member of the public. So all we can do is to put in a complaint with the Judicial Conduct Office about the conduct of the judge, because he conducted himself badly by hearing a case when he probably shouldn't have heard it, because he at least gives the impression of apparent bias. And that complaint will be judged ultimately by Shabana Mahmood, who is linked to the Fabian Society. Oh. And the judge is a Fabian. So how am I to have any faith in that process? And which genius thought that having a secret society in Great Britain would in any way end up doing any form of good? The other thing I'd like to flag, because I think it gets missed, is that Orwell, who was a proper socialist, a proper lefty, he didn't like these people. And there's a reason why 1984 is 1984, because the Fabians are founded in 1884. And with their slow movement, he thought they'd get their way by 1984. Now, we've held them off. We've held them at bay. We've got to 2025. But by the skin of our teeth, we appear to be in the middle of something that is just not decent, moral, or good, or professional, or it seems to be some sort of cultish ideology. And it's a cult.
Now, is Stephen overreacting? Was the Spectator article a cover-up? A way to placate the masses? It is possible that these two individuals can actually exist in the same universe, because it's to do with perspective and perception, isn't it? As I've said, I think the Spectator article was written in good faith. I believe it to be true for that individual. Is Stephen the barrister essentially jumping at shadows, or is he onto something? And I know at least one barrister who's an excellent one and a great friend of mine, and you know, he does believe in the law, and the law is important, and things not getting tarnished. And I think this is where Stephen's coming from. So if there's any sense of not exactly manipulation, influence, bias, then we have to have a look at that. But perhaps he is overreacting. Perhaps that is just getting into those realms of no, it doesn't really matter. It's a loose amalgamation of people. It is like belonging to the same yoga club. However, to begin to wrap this up, what I would say is that, and I talked to a few people one-on-one and in groups about this. One way to figure out someone's psychology or group psychology is to look at the behaviours, those that are visible, particularly those that are unguarded or done by design. Look at the behaviours. The behaviours tell us, or can tell us, an awful lot about what is going on, the mechanism of thought, intention and motivation. So let's look at what maybe you've experienced or maybe you see going on. Now, we're going to have an opinion on what may be causing that, of course, but it is interesting to consider this opinion. So this is back to Joseph, the political strategist, who we heard from a little while ago.
Think about it this way. Everything they do is to try and centralise. The nation state is not good for them because it fractures. It gives you a loyalty to something that isn't central. They want you to own nothing and be happy, essentially, where we heard that language before, well, of course, from the World Economic Forum, which pushes an agenda that is started both by the Fabians and also by another group, the Frankfurt School, who were influential in pushing European communism. These are all very similar movements. They all have similar end goals: the destruction of the nuclear family, the destruction of religion, the destruction of the nation state, the centralization of funds, taking away the right to private property. These are very, very sinister people, and they do it essentially, as Stephen has outlined, through international law, through globalization, through supranationalization, through taking away your ties to what is real and immediate and secure and in your community. And the antidote to that, in my opinion, is what we're seeing happening in certain countries, like what's happened with Javier Milei, where he's slashed the bureaucracy in Argentina, what's happening to an extent in America with Trump in his second term, and what's happened in places like Hungary, where Viktor Orban has fought back against a very socialist deep state. These countries are doing the right thing by returning to communities, returning to nationhood, returning to religion, returning to families, putting motherhood at the forefront of what goes on in society and fatherhood at the forefront of what goes on in society, rather than the Bank of England and the exchange rate. And I think what we need to do, if we're serious about ever toppling this calculated, cold, 140-year-old regime, is to start thinking seriously about what makes us us.
So, start thinking seriously about what makes us us. There, in terms of the country, there have been quite a lot of conversations, quite a lot of loud voices about the importance of identifying and holding on to those things that make us us. Now, whether you agree with Joseph or not, I think it is an interesting perspective, because we do seem to see things around, maybe by design, maybe by accident, maybe entropy, maybe late stage capitalism, maybe it's got a different name and a different cause. But we do seem to see things changing in a way that a lot of people don't want them to be changing. And why is that? What is driving that? Is it just coincidence, or is there something going on? And I come back to, I doubt it is the rank and file of the Fabian members, but are the people, whether they're Fabians or not, maybe that's just a sort of misdirection, but it does seem as if there are people around whose ideology is different from the expectations and wishes and desires and hopes and aspirations of a heck of a lot of people, the vast majority in this country and indeed in other countries as well. Anyway, what do you think about all of that? What do you think about the Fabian Society?